Namaskar. Welcome to Sansad TV. I am Rajiv Kumar Singh. So the G20 summit in the national capital has come to a conclusion. Though India would continue to be president of the World Forum for another 2.5 months, the gavel of presidency has been passed on to Brazil. Over the last 2 days, the world witnessed India's organizational efficiency and its hospitality at their best. Leaders from all over the world congregated for the summit and hailed India for a very successful G20 presidency. Over the next half an hour, we will go through all that took place during G20 summit in the national capital. India today formally handed over the G20 presidency to Brazil at the closing ceremony of the annual summit of the grouping that was held in New Delhi this weekend. Prime Minister Narendra Modi completed the transition by handing over the ceremonial gavel to the presidency of Brazil. President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva accepted it. The Prime Minister expressed faith in the Troika spirit. He further mentioned that India still has the presidency for the next 2.5 months and proposed a virtual summit towards the end of November to analyze further developments. Let us listen in to what all did the Prime Minister say, concluding the G20 summit at New Delhi.
ब्राजील को हम पूरा सहयोग देंगे और हमें विश्वास है कि उनके नेतृत्व में G20 हमारे साझा लक्ष्यों को और आगे बढ़ाएगा। मैं ब्राजील के राष्ट्रपति और मेरे मित्र लूला डी सिल्वा को हार्दिक शुभकामनाएं देता हूं और मैं उनको प्रेसिडेंसी का गेवल सौंपता हूं। Your Highnesses, एक्सेलेंसीज, जैसा आप सब जानते हैं, भारत के पास नवंबर तक G20 प्रेसिडेंसी की भी जिम्मेदारी है। अभी 2.5 महीने बाकी हैं। इन 2 दिनों में आप सभी ने अनेक बातें यहां रखी हैं, सुझाव दिए हैं, बहुत सारे प्रस्ताव रखे हैं। हमारी ये जिम्मेदारी है कि जो सुझाव आए हैं गति कैसे लाई जा सकती है। मेरा प्रस्ताव है कि हम नवंबर के अंत में G20 का एक वर्चुअल सेशन और रखें। उस सेशन में हम इस समिट के दौरान तय विषयों की समीक्षा कर सकते हैं। इन सब की डिटेल्स हमारी टीम आप सभी के साथ शेयर करेगी। मैं उम्मीद करता हूं कि आप सब इससे जुड़ेंगे। योर हाइनेसेस, एक्सेलेंसीज, इसी के साथ मैं G20 समिट के समापन की घोषणा करता हूं। वन अर्थ, वन फैमिली, वन फ्यूचर का रोड मैप सुखद हो। स्वस्ति अस्तु विश्वस्य, यानी संपूर्ण विश्व में आशा और शांति का संचार हो। 140 करोड़ भारतीयों की इसी मंगल कामना के साथ आप सभी का बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद।
On the second day of the summit, on Sunday, Prime Minister Narendra Modi made a fresh push for reforms in global bodies, including the United Nations, saying despite the increase in member states of the world body, the number of permanent members in the UN Security Council has remained the same. Addressing the One Future session of the G20 summit, the Prime Minister said the world's new realities should be reflected in new global structure. At the summit, he called for framework for responsible human-centric AI governance to help every country benefit from new gen technology. PM Modi also led G20 leaders in a symbolic tree plantation ceremony at the Bharat Mandapam Convention Center to mark the grouping's two-day summit. Saplings of either national or native trees of respective G20 nations will be planted at the Bharat Mandapam, where a G20 garden will be created. Ahead of the second day of the G20 summit, world leaders gathered at the Rajghat to pay their respects to Mahatma Gandhi. Prime Minister Narendra Modi welcomed the dignitaries and presented them with khadi shawls, symbolic of India's freedom struggle and the legacy of Mahatma Gandhi, as he promoted the use of khadi as a means of self-reliance. Despite inclement weather, the heads of state and government and heads of international organizations gathered to pay homage to the Mahatma, laid wreath at the memorial and observed a minute of silence. The 18th G20 summit kick-started on Saturday with Prime Minister Narendra Modi welcoming world leaders at the Bharat Mandapam International Exhibition and Convention Center in Pragati Maidan in New Delhi. Standing in front of the replica of the wheel from the Konark Sun Temple in Odisha, the Prime Minister shook hands with the heads of state of the G20 nations and the guest countries, extending them a warm welcome ahead of the crucial two-day summit. The Prime Minister was also seen explaining to US President Joe Biden the significance of the Konark Wheel. Also known as the Sun Temple Wheel, it is an iconic architectural element that holds immense cultural, religious and historical significance in India. It is associated with the Konark Sun Temple, a UNESCO World Heritage Site located in the town of Konark in Odisha. The Konark Wheel was built during the 13th century under the reign of King Narsingadev I. The wheel, with 24 spokes, is also adapted into India's national flag, embodies India's ancient wisdom, advanced civilization and architectural excellence. The handshakes and greetings were followed by Prime Minister Modi's inaugural address to the G20 leaders, in which he spoke about how India's G20 presidency has become a symbol of Sabka Saath, both inside and outside the country. Here are some significant excerpts from PM Modi's inaugural speech at the G20 summit.
Your Highnesses, Excellencies, G20 के प्रेसिडेंट के तौर पर भारत आप सभी का हार्दिक स्वागत करता है। इस समय जिस स्थान पर हम एकत्रित हैं, यहां से कुछ ही किलोमीटर के फासले पर लगभग 2500 साल पुराना एक स्तंभ लगा हुआ है। इस स्तंभ पर प्राकृत भाषा में लिखा है, हेवम लोकसा हित मुखेति अथ इयम नातिसु हेवम।
हेवम लोकसा हित मुखेति अथ इयम नातिसु हेवम।
Prime Minister Narendra Modi began his inaugural address to the G20 leaders by mentioning this verse inscribed on one of the pillars of Ashoka. It means the welfare and happiness of humanity should always be ensured, highlighting the message that India gave to the world 2,500 years ago. The Prime Minister reminded the world leaders to overcome trust deficit and move forward with a human-centric approach.
कोविड-19 के बाद विश्व में एक बहुत बड़ा संकट विश्वास के अभाव का आया है। युद्ध ने इस ट्रस्ट डेफिसिट को और गहरा किया है। जब हम कोविड को हरा सकते हैं तो हम आपसी विश्वास पर आए इस संकट पर भी विजय प्राप्त कर सकते हैं। आज G20 के प्रेसिडेंट के तौर पर भारत पूरी दुनिया का आह्वान करता है कि हम मिलकर सबसे पहले इस ग्लोबल ट्रस्ट डेफिसिट को एक विश्वास, एक भरोसे में बदलें। यह हम सभी के साथ मिलकर चलने का समय है और इसलिए सबका साथ, सबका विकास, सबका विश्वास, सबका प्रयास का मंत्र हम सभी के लिए एक पथ प्रदर्शक बन सकता है।
Noting that India's G20 presidency has become a symbol of inclusion both inside and outside the country, Prime Minister Modi informed world leaders about the engagement and participation of millions of Indians in the G20 events.
भारत की G20 प्रेसिडेंसी देश के भीतर और देश के बाहर इंक्लूजन का, सबका साथ का प्रतीक बन गई है। भारत में ये पीपल्स G20 बन गया। करोड़ों भारतीय इससे जुड़े। देश के 60 से ज्यादा शहरों में 200 से ज्यादा अधिक बैठकें हुई।
However, the most defining milestone towards starting a more inclusive G20 was when the Prime Minister announced the inclusion of the African Union as a permanent member of the bloc.
सबका साथ की भावना से ही भारत ने प्रस्ताव रखा था कि अफ्रीकन यूनियन को G20 की स्थायी सदस्यता दी जाए। मेरा विश्वास है कि इस प्रस्ताव पर हम सबकी सहमति है। आप सबकी सहमति से आगे की कार्रवाई शुरू करने से पहले मैं अफ्रीकन यूनियन के अध्यक्ष को G20 के स्थायी सदस्य के रूप में अपना स्थान ग्रहण करने के लिए आमंत्रित करता हूं।
Making the G20 more inclusive had been one of the key priorities of India's presidency. Amid the deep geopolitical divide and lack of consensus among world leaders, even within the G20, the agreement on granting permanent member status to the African Union in the group of 20 top world economies signals an important step in giving voice to the most resource-rich yet underdeveloped region of the global south. The induction of the 55-nation bloc makes G20 more representative as it will now represent 80% of global citizens compared to about 65% earlier. Further, AU and its membership will prove crucial to discussions on the G20 high table as Africa poses central to global issues like food security, migration and climate change. Following PM Modi's inaugural address, the first session on the theme One Earth was held with focus on climate change and other goals. World leaders at the G20 summit discussed on ways to address the challenges posed by climate change. Developing countries argued that wealthier nations should take greater responsibility for emission reductions, given their massive historical emissions, and provide the necessary means of implementation to assist developing and vulnerable nations in transitioning to clear and clean energy and adapting the climate change. In a huge win for India's G20 presidency, the New Delhi Leaders Summit declaration was adopted on September 9th after consensus was reached among the member states. Prime Minister Narendra Modi announced the adoption and said it was made possible after cooperation from all.
In a major breakthrough indicative of India's success in G20 summit, a consensus was reached and New Delhi Leaders Declaration was adopted on September 9th. The major announcement was made by Prime Minister Narendra Modi himself at the second session One Family of the G20 summit. Addressing the session, Prime Minister Narendra Modi said that India's presidency has been the most ambitious in the history of the grouping.
हमारी टीम्स के हार्डवर्क से और आप सभी के सहयोग से नई दिल्ली G20 लीडर्स समिट डिक्लेरेशन पर सहमति बनी है। मेरा प्रस्ताव है कि इस लीडर्स डिक्लेरेशन को भी एडॉप्ट किया जाए। मैं इस डिक्लेरेशन को एडॉप्ट करने की घोषणा करता हूं।
Following the agreement on Delhi Declaration, Prime Minister Modi thanked the ministers, Sherpas and all officials for making it possible.
इस अवसर पर मैं हमारे मंत्रीगण, शेरपा और सभी अधिकारियों का हृदय से अभिनंदन करता हूं, जिन्होंने अथाक परिश्रम करके इसे सार्थक किया है और इसलिए वे सभी अभिनंदन के अधिकारी हैं।
During his address, the Prime Minister also called on G20 leaders to work on the Green Credit Initiative. India's G20 Sherpa Amitabh Kant dubbed the declaration historic and path-breaking and said there was 100% consensus on all developmental and geopolitical issues.
The New Delhi Leaders Declaration has 83 paras in all. All 83 paras have 100% consensus across all countries. There are 8 paras on the geopolitical issue, which is entitled Planet, People, Peace and Prosperity. All those 8 paras have 100% acceptance. All countries have unanimously supported the New Delhi Leaders Declaration. This is one declaration without a single footnote and without any chair's summary. This is a complete statement with 100% unanimity.
The declaration noted that G20 is not a platform to resolve geopolitical and security issues, but also acknowledges that these issues can have significant consequences for the global economy. The declaration stressed that the use or threat of use of nuclear weapons to be inadmissible. It is to be noted that India's G20 presidency has been the most ambitious in the history of G20. With 112 outcomes and presidency documents, India has more than doubled the substantive work from previous presidencies. According to official data, India has had 73 outcomes as compared to countries like Indonesia, Italy and Saudi Arabia, which have had 27, 36 and 22 outcomes respectively. The Delhi Declaration lays emphasis on these key issues, which include sustainable and inclusive growth, accelerating progress on sustainable development goals, Green Development Pact for a sustainable future, multilateral institutions for the 21st century, countering terrorism and money laundering, creating a more inclusive world, among others.
Of the India-Middle East-Europe Mega Economic Corridor, the first of its kind initiative on cooperation on connectivity and infrastructure. The initiative involves India, the UAE, Saudi Arabia, the European Union, France, Italy, Germany and the US. The proposed corridor will comprise of two separate corridors, the Eastern Corridor and the Northern Corridor. The former will connect India to Arabian Gulf and the latter will connect the Arabian Gulf to Europe. The corridor is expected to drive existing trade and manufacturing while strengthening food security and supply chains. Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman and Saudi Arabia expressed gratitude for integrating the initiative. The Prime Minister said the economic corridor holds the potential to serve as a symbol of collaboration, innovation and collective advancement.
हम सब ने एक महत्वपूर्ण और ऐतिहासिक समझौता संपन्न होते हुए देखा है। आने वाले समय में यह भारत, पश्चिम एशिया और यूरोप के बीच इकोनॉमिक इंटीग्रेशन का प्रभावी माध्यम होगा। यह पूरे विश्व में कनेक्टिविटी और विकास को सस्टेनेबल दिशा प्रदान करेगा। हमने ग्लोबल साउथ के अनेक देशों में एक विश्वसनीय पार्टनर के रूप में एनर्जी, रेलवे, वाटर, टेक्नोलॉजी पार्क्स जैसे क्षेत्रों में इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर प्रोजेक्ट्स इंप्लीमेंट किए हैं। इन प्रयासों में हमने डिमांड ड्रिवन और ट्रांसपेरेंट अप्रोच पर विशेष रूप से बल दिया है। पीजीआईआई के माध्यम से हम ग्लोबल साउथ के देशों में इंफ्रास्ट्रक्चर गैप को कम करने में महत्वपूर्ण योगदान दे सकते हैं।
President Joe Biden termed the launch a big deal and emphasized that this initiative extends beyond mere infrastructure development.
This is a real big deal. And I want to thank you, Mr. Prime Minister. One Earth, one family, one future. That's the focus of this G20 summit. And in many ways, it's also the focus of this partnership that we're talking about today. Building sustainable, resilient infrastructure, making quality infrastructure investments, and creating a better future. A future that presents greater opportunity, dignity, and prosperity for everyone. Last year, we came together as one to commit to this vision. And this afternoon, I want to highlight the key ways in which the United States and our partners are working to make this a reality. Economic corridors. You're going to hear that phrase more than once, I expect, over the next decade. Economic corridors. As we work to address infrastructure gaps across low- and middle-income countries, we need to maximize the impacts of our investments. That's why a few months ago I announced that the United States will work with our partners to invest in economic corridors.
European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen said that the launch of the India-Middle East-Europe Economic Corridor is historic and it would be the most direct connection to date between India, the Arabian Gulf and Europe.
The India-Middle East-Europe Economic Corridor, this is nothing but historic. It will be the most direct connection to date between India, the Arabian Gulf and Europe, with a rail link that will make trade between India and Europe 40% faster, with an electricity cable and a clean hydrogen pipeline to foster clean energy trade between Asia, the Middle East and Europe, with a high-speed data cable to link some of the most innovative digital ecosystems in the world, and create business opportunities all along the way. These are state-of-the-art connections for the world of tomorrow, faster, shorter, cleaner.
French President Emmanuel Macron said his country was committed to invest alongside with other countries on the new road.
We commit to invest alongside with you on this road, and this is a very important project from Asia through Middle East to Europe to offer big opportunities and connect people. But our intention is as well to make it real and to be sure that after this commitment we have concrete results, and especially to have the first global green trade road, meaning having net zero transport infrastructure, so to be sure that we have the best technologies. We have hydrogen being part of this project, and we channel all the possible common developments. I think as well our intention is to have a fair process.
Italian Prime Minister Giorgia Meloni celebrated the launch of the new economic corridor, calling it a milestone in strengthening global interconnections.
Today's launch of the new economic corridor between India and the Middle East and Europe goes precisely in this direction and is a milestone in strengthening global interconnections. And that is why I want to thank Prime Minister Modi, President Biden, and all the others, Ursula von der Leyen and all the others who made it possible, for it's a very important thing. This will scale up our economy's growth, opening enormous potential for mutual benefits.
As part of the G20 presidency, India also launched a Global Biofuels Alliance to enhance cooperation in cleaner fuels and intensify their use. The alliance has India, the United States and Brazil as its founding members. Prime Minister Narendra Modi urged other countries to also join the initiative.
Taking another lead in the climate discourse, Prime Minister Narendra Modi announced the launch of Global Biofuel Alliance on day one of the G20 Leaders Summit. Conceptualized at the behest of India, the alliance is aimed at accelerating global efforts to meet net zero emissions targets by facilitating trade in biofuels derived from sources including plant and animal waste. Describing it as a watershed moment in the quest towards sustainability and clean energy, the Prime Minister urged G20 member states and other nations to join the initiative. The Global Biofuels Alliance is a key initiative and priority under India's G20 presidency in support of the global energy transition. The alliance will facilitate cooperation and promote use of sustainable biofuels, including in the transportation sector. Its focus will primarily be on strengthening markets, facilitating global biofuel trade, developing concrete policy lesson sharing, and providing technical support for national biofuel programs worldwide. Further, it will help in India's transition to alternative fuels and cutting its import bill as it seeks to achieve its net zero carbon emission goal by 2070. The International Energy Agency estimates that global sustainable biofuel production would need to triple by 2030 to put the world's energy system on track towards net zero emissions by 2050. The Global Biofuel Alliance will enable wider international cooperation in realizing the huge untapped potential of sustainable biofuels in catering to common global goods of climate change mitigation through reduced carbon emissions and achieving sustainable development goals.
At the end of the Day One summit on Saturday, Union Minister for External Affairs S. Jaishankar, in a press briefing, called the Indian G20 presidency exceptional and said that it contributed to making India world-ready and the world India-ready.
The Indian presidency, if I may say so, has been exceptional. Events have been spread across 60 cities, which are truly across the length and breadth of India. There has been a popular participation and a societal involvement of an extraordinary degree. The interest in G20 proceedings have been particularly strong among our youth. It has been an opportunity to showcase our culture, traditions, and heritage as well. The G20 has contributed to making India world-ready and the world India-ready.
That's all in this program. Keep watching Sansad Television. Good night.